So, you want to build gameplay, right? First things first, you gotta pick a song. Now, there's all kinds of songs on Newgrounds, as well as a good number of them just built into the game. You know, if you own the Mega Hack, you can actually use the bypass in order to get the songs. I'm not going to be covering that today, or those songs. But for the sake, we'll use something simple for the sake of today. Let's use Stardust here, right? It's an active song with a lot going on. Well, let's actually say we decide we don't want that. We want to make something a little easier, right? So you scroll through, you find a song that you like. In this case, we'll use Leaving Leafwood Forest by Boss Fight. Now, listen to that song, right? It's got decent pacing. It's fairly active, but it's a little slower. So what I like to do when I have a song like that is I actually like to start MIDI. So, again, just listen to that. Like, those light, airy dun dun dun. So, we're going to make a layout to fit. And we're actually going to start it, we're going to make an easy level. So, we're going to start it with something kind of like this. And you can use these line blocks. That's what I'm mostly going to use. You can also use these default blocks. Right? And of course the main thing here, right, is listen to the click. Everything here stacks up with the music. And you can sync landings to it, you can sync jumps to it, but you want the music to generally line up with something that the player is doing. For example, here we're going to actually have the player ascend by jumping there. Now, when you have something like this, right, with an inordinate timing, I would use any of these pulsing arrows. I just shrink them to about 50, which is the normal minimum. And then you can just move them over to where you want the player to jump. And then from here, player lands on a platform. And then, let's say you want them to jump a little early here. So you put a little spike on it. Right? Simple as that. Adds a little bit of danger. And of course, you'd want to have something down here to tell the player, like, hey, you need to jump. For the sake of layouts, I actually prefer these angled spikes because they don't sink below the ground when used. And what that means is that the player clearly sees. And the reason why I use this here is so that you can actually watch for the music. Now, again, we're making something a little easier here. So, again, just a little spike is all we need. You can, make the gameplay more active if you want. And a lot of this is going to come down to personal preference, right? You're going to want more activity in a demon level than you are in, say, this is like a 3-star level. Like, you might even move these down just a touch here to make it smoother. And it may seem like the level's being tested a lot, right? You want to test your levels as frequently as you can when you're making layouts. It's actually, it's crucially important because it lets you understand where the player is going to go, what it's going to look like, and how it's going to feel. There's nothing worse than a level that you can tell hasn't been adequately play tested. And trust me, you will know. So here, for example, you want them to jump. You don't want to extend this block a little bit. There's actually another thing you can do. And that's, you can add something like this. I always add a second spike for the sake of variety. Because if you have too many of one, it's going to look a little boring. So it's really, it's a lot of personal preference, what you do here. And another thing, if you don't feel like playing the whole level over again, you could set a start position, right? It's page 1 of the triggers tab, edit object. You get a menu here to pick the speed, whether you're upside down, whether it's a dual, whether you're mini, and your game mode. You don't need anything more than that. For example there, it seems like I'm clicking a little fast. And that's something you can have, is something like this. You can use chains of orbs together. I generally don't recommend, in most cases, more than 2, and in any case, more than 3. You could do falling jumps too. But you see here how it kind of just doesn't play out very accurate to intention. And suddenly, you have something that looks significantly better. Not only are you getting the full range of motion between the orbs that you want, but it syncs more. And what I'll often do in situations like this is the first orb will actually hit a little higher. Right, and you can even chain these. And for a little variety, right, you can have something a little bit different. You know, and you'll commonly see these in RobTop levels. In fact, he even continues to do it in Finger Dash, and does it most notably in X-Step. And it's another thing you can do to add a little bit of variety to your gameplay, because you do not want it to get stale. If it gets stale at any point, people aren't going to like the level. You know, and if you feel that it's not consistent, you can always widen it up. But in this case, it is rather consistent, so we're going to keep it like this. Okay, so there, it's like a little late. So we add a small spike. Yeah, and it's one of those where it's just experimenting is important. Because if you don't experiment, you're never going to discover new things. And new things are, well, as they say, variety is the spice of life. So, black orbs, important with these. They send you down at an extremely harsh angle. So, you'll see what that looks like coming up here. See, it cuts your momentum and just turns it into a rapid fall. And so, what you want to often do with these is use them for sync, but do not use them a lot. You know, and I'll oftentimes just use them with like a light platform here when doing an easier level. You want something for the player to land on below. You also want to make sure that the player needs to click on this. So in this case, I've gone and done that by having a structure here. And it's just something that a lot of creators will do to help sync the level. And you can also use portals to achieve your sync. And again, it's just all about having sync, right? So in this case, I'm actually going to swap this one out because it goes mute for so long. And way up here, we're going to have a gravity portal swap. Now, instead of turning back yellow again, because it does end the mute, we're going to have a transition. So you notice it picks up a little bit. It gains a little bit of energy. So we're going to go into a ship, and we're actually going to increase our speed using a portal. Leaving this check mark means that when the line enters it, it'll speed up. So let's do that with 4 times here, right? Notice how fast that gets? Let's not check it. That's something very important to remember. If you have portals that you don't intend the player to hit, uncheck them, or you will accidentally make your gameplay fail to sync. Here you can oftentimes actually just make these invisible. Most people do during transitions. That's more of a decoration thing. Here we're going to add structures to them. So, with the ship, it's very important to remember you have a space of 10 blocks of which the player can work with. Now, you don't want the player to get bored, so you want to have pretty common structures. But one of the biggest mistakes you can have is letting them be repetitive or boring. Or even worse, you don't want them to not engage the gameplay. Right, and you want to give ample time on all transitions. One big piece of advice I try to give to all the newer creators is to vary up your spikes, and most importantly, vary up the positions of everything. You don't want to see a level where you don't go up or down much at all in a ship. Because if a level can be completed by simply straight flying it, then you haven't made much of a level worth playing. Now, here's something I'm also going to talk about while we're here. I'm going to add ground spikes to this section. This ship, I'm actually only going to have ground spikes here and there. And that's just to help keep it a little more interesting and easier for the player. Because this is an easier level after all. And so, I like to have little spikes on the edges when I do this. Now, notably here, I've gone and placed one of these saws. That's actually to discourage the player from going up here. But now's the time where I discuss something important. You can have in your layouts hidden coin routes. In fact, it's very commonly encouraged. So in this case, we're actually going to make our coin rather large. We don't want the player to miss it by coming through here. And so, it's there. It actually is there for the purpose of enticing the player to engage a little more with the level. Possibly trigger a little bit of replayability, which helps the creator understand who you are a little more. Your gameplay says a lot about who you are. It does a lot more than people think, and a lot more than most decorational styles or CP grinders. And you can have structures kind of like these populate your ship parts. I know I like to. And it just allows things to look a little better. Of course, you don't have to have spikes on top of all of them. That's just the decision I've made for this particular layout. Is I'm still going to run an exclusive based ship part where you're not supposed to touch things. Now, you want to give players ample time to recover from your coin routes, and the easier the level, the easier your coin routes are generally going to be. Of course, there are exceptions to this. So in this case, this is a somewhat difficult ship part to do if you grab the coin. And ship gameplay I'm actually only covering because I find it personally one of the hardest types of gameplay to make. A lot of people don't find it such. A lot of people even find it easy. But especially when it comes to making them for easier levels, I find that a lot of people get it a little mixed up. And usually, the biggest offense I find most people making is that you can complete the whole ship part by basically straight flying. And, well, there's just not a lot of fun in that. Another thing you can do is you can actually add additional structures to help kind of dissuade the player from falling too fast, right? Saw blades also do a lot for gameplay. But just to make sure that everything fits in, I always have a high tendency to heavily vary the height at which a player plays. So I like to create a lot of swings. In which case this one might be even a little too difficult, so we're going to move it down a little. And it really is a pretty simple process. Gameplay is not the hardest thing to do. There's a reason a lot of people will kind of crap on people who just build gameplay. I'm not here to talk about that topic, though. I'm mostly just here to show you how I think it should be done. This is my way of doing gameplay. And that really covers most of the basic topics. Again, it's just a lot of experimenting and figuring out what you want to do. So, for the sake of keeping it interesting and keeping this relatively brief, I'm going to go ahead and just show the full level as it is and complete this out.